It's my pleasure to introduce myself. I'm Sarntuya Zandaria from UNESCO Division of Water Sciences, and this session is organized by UNESCO International Hydrological Program jointly with the Swedish Development and Cooperation Agency, Sida, in the framework of the UNESCO-Sida project on emerging pollutants in wastewater reuse in developing countries. And this official event is entitled UNESCO Event on Emerging Pollutants in Water and Wastewater, UNESCO-Sida Project Case Studies. And with this, I would like to invite our director, Mrs. Blanca Jimenez Cisneros, Director of Division of Water Sciences of UNESCO, Secretary of International Hydrological Program of UNESCO, to say opening speech on behalf of UNESCO. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to this session in which we will be exploring some case studies on emerging pollutants. This has been financed by the Swedish International Cooperation Agency, Sida, and it's a very interesting project. I remember very well when at UNESCO we have been requested to submit proposals, research proposals. And we were told at that time, because this request landed in the science sector, so it was not only about water, it was about all the areas that UNESCO was covering, that we were supposed to prepare proposals that were highly scientific, but at the same time relevant. I explored which were the options, and I thought that emerging pollutants could be one aspect that could be proposed. A first smart text to present this proposal to Sida was made. And the first question that Sida made to UNESCO when we have our meeting to analyze about these proposals was why this is relevant, and mostly why this is relevant for developed and developing countries. Because sometimes it's very hard to think that emerging pollutants can be relevant to developing countries. I made a presentation and I managed to convince them that it was relevant to the entire world, because this is a problem that we are not simply seeing. We are not simply seeing because first, it's very hard to detect emerging pollutants. I had the honor in Latin America to have the first laboratory measuring these pollutants for the region, and found that as in many other developed countries, we have this problem. And we had as well all these challenges, but data was missing, information was missing, and this subject is a challenge for developed countries because the cost, the need of high skills, scientific and analytical. And then I thought that if it is a problem for developed countries, for developing countries, it will be something that will be hard to overcome. That is why Sida accepted to fund this proposal, and after that, with the support of Sarntuya, which is here, and we put a final proposal for the Sida, and it was selected, and based on this proposal, case studies from different regions were screened. A call was made, an open call to many regions. If I remember correctly, Sarntuya received around 45 proposals, and she picked the best cases that were available from different regions, having a good representation of problems, of ideas, of different themes. And that's what we are going to hear today, thanks to this program that has been put in place by Sarntuya. With that, I would like, because I know the time is very short, I would like to end and be sure that this is one of the areas that, even if it is not considered as urgent as common problems of sanitation, is something that we need to start to be looking at, because the challenges, when we will find out, we will be as urgent as common challenge dealing with sanitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Blanca, for giving very detailed and a nice introduction about the background of this project, how this project was born. And it's now my pleasure to invite our co-host from the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, Ms. Dr. Claire Linga. And actually, I would like to say that this is the second time that we are cooperating with Sweden on this topic. In 2010, at the Stockholm World Water Week, UNESCO has organized a very successful event, Emerging Pollutants and New Water Quality Challenge, together with Swedish Water Institute. And that seminar was under the name of Professor Dr. Malene Falkenmark, and it was a very successful event, so it's a pleasure to continue our cooperation with Sweden. The floor is yours.
Good morning. It's with great pleasure that I'm part of this event on emerging pollutants in water and wastewater. It's certainly a very important topic, and Sida is proud to be able to support the important research that UNESCO is doing. Is that? Okay, thanks. Sweden has a long-standing collaboration with UNESCO, and we share core values like the importance of the environment, importance of equality and women's empowerment. And I think this is what makes the collaboration so fruitful. Sida has recently signed an agreement with UNESCO for 2014 to 2017, providing support in the fields of education, science, communication and culture. This sends a strong signal that Sida values the work that UNESCO is doing and sees UNESCO as a credible global partner in these important areas. The support is 400 million Swedish kronor, that's equivalent to about 47 million US dollars. Most of the support is going to education, as that's the largest sector. There's a significant amount going to the natural sciences, where we're supporting 8 different projects, where this project on emerging pollutants is one of them. It's a highly relevant area, and because the pressure of human activities is becoming more and more, and there's more pressure on water as a whole. Wastewater reuse is becoming more common, and therefore the quality is of utmost importance, and wastewater management strategies are very important. Improper disposal of untreated wastewater and contaminated wastewater can put the environment at risk, and it can pose a real health problem to humans and animals. So I'm very excited to be here. Look forward to hearing more about the different case studies and taking part in the discussions afterwards. Thank you.
And I would like to invite you to continue with the presentation. This presentation will give information about why this topic is particularly important for Sweden to promote the science, knowledge, and information throughout the world. Yeah, so please continue.
Is there a pointer on this one? No? I'll change the slides. Okay. So I work at the unit for tell me if I'm moving too far away from the microphone here. I work at the Unit for Research Cooperation at Sida. Water is not my speciality. My work is mainly in research cooperation. I'll give a presentation about the agreement that we have with UNESCO, and I'll also try to present Sida's work on water as a whole as best as I can. And for any in-depth questions, I'll refer questions to our policy experts and the people, the other staff at Sida. So, Sida is a government agency. I'll just organise my papers here. Government agency working on behalf of the Swedish Parliament and government with the mission to reduce poverty in the world. There are close to 700 employees. Their headquarters is in Stockholm, and there are about 200 people working internationally in our partner countries. The 2015 budget was approximately 30 billion kroners. That's equivalent to about $3.5 billion US dollars. Here you see the Swedish bilateral aid divided into various sectors. This doesn't represent the whole aid budget. That's about 30 billion Swedish kronor. So this is the majority of it and shows how the aid is divided into different sectors. As you see, democracy, human rights, and water and gender equality receives a large part, about 30%. Humanitarian aid is about 20%, and then there are various sectors here. Of course, water would cut across a lot of these sectors, so it's not defined in a specific sector, but it would be a large part of the environment, even research, and our health sector. As I mentioned, we have this agreement with UNESCO lasting over 4 years. The disbursement for natural sciences came at the end of last year, so effectively it's 3.5 years. The education sector is the largest component of 280 million Swedish kronor, and the science sector component is 38 million Swedish kronor, equivalent to $4.5 million US dollars. So I'll just briefly present the different projects that we are supporting in the science sector. Apologies, this is a bit crammed, but I wanted to fit it into one slide. The first, there are 5 areas, and some areas have 2 projects, so effectively making 8 different projects. The first area is in science, technology, and innovation, and this is looking at indicators, and so that you can analyze these indicators and map the STI landscape. The second one is a very interesting one, transdisciplinary research on climate change adaptation for vulnerable indigenous communities in sub-Saharan Africa. This is trying to couple indigenous knowledge with traditional scientific knowledge, so that knowledge from indigenous communities can be incorporated and used. The third project is building and mobilizing capacity for developing countries to participate in the Future Earth initiative. Then there are 2 geoscience programs. One of them is mapping and assessing the environmental health impacts of abandoned mines in sub-Saharan Africa. The second one is support to a network of earth scientists in the form of the African Network of Earth Science Institutions. And the fifth one is where this project on emerging pollutants is. I should also mention in connection with this that Sida supports significant research on antibiotic resistance, which is becoming more and more of a global issue. And there's the African Drought Early Warning System expansion to Southern Africa also. Now I'll move over and talk more about Sida's thematic priorities. So there are 3 thematic priorities at Sida: environment and climate change, gender equality, and human rights and democracy. So water is a significant component of environment and climate change, but of course is cross-cutting through these 3 issues. In Sida we work through 13 thematic networks, and water is one of those, and that's a very efficient way of working across the different sections that we work in. As water is so cross-cutting, it's an important way to disseminate information and work effectively throughout the organization. Sida's support to the water sector is focused on 2 main areas. The first one is water supply, sanitation, hygiene, and waste management. Important components here is improving access to services, and that might be through encouraging democratic and efficient institutions, setting up municipal services. In water resource management, it's support to sustainable, accountable, and equitable management regimes. Conflict prevention is a large component here. More than 50% of the world's water resources are shared between 2 or more countries' borders, and that means that conflict prevention and conflict resolution is an important component. Approximately about 5% of Sida's total disbursements related to water in 2013, and it's expected to be about the same in 2014 and 15. So these are some of the areas that Sida is specifically working in. Improved access to water and sanitation, water resource management, sector reforms and capacity of the water authorities, anti-corruption and increased transparency, transboundary water management, water diplomacy and conflict management, water and wastewater treatment, and water and sanitation in regards to humanitarian operations. So what strategies do we use to implement all this support? Here I'm just listing all the organizations. You're probably familiar with quite a few of them. These are a number of global organizations we work with. There's also the regional areas that we are active in, and the countries where we have bilateral collaborations. There's a strong emphasis on the UN system and a significant contribution, especially to UNICEF WASH. Here you see a portfolio overview of the support to water. You'll see in the geographical distribution, there's quite a large component going to global organizations, and then you see the support to the various regions in the world. The graph to the right gives the distributions per sector. This is the OECD DAC-defined subsectors. And you'll see that the contribution has almost doubled from 2011 to 2013. There's a large contribution in water and sanitation, small systems and large systems. About 30% of the support is going into both these areas. And some examples of what the Swedish work with water has led to. Sweden's had about 25 years of collaborating with Bolivia on water issues. The Swedish support has, among other things, contributed to the installment of 900 ecological dry toilets in the La Paz region. And here I've got just quite a nice quote from one of the people. Before one had to look around the river for empty places behind walls, we women were afraid, but it was the only option because most people don't have bathrooms and had to go to the river. Now with the bathroom it's safer and easier. Here's another example from Kenya, the water sector program there. More than 156 people have gained access to increased water and sanitation services. 80% of the surveyed women indicate that water availability at the household level has increased. 75% of the women noted that the incidence of diarrhea had decreased. So, as you see from these examples, there's a strong coupling between water, sanitation and hygiene and gender equality. A lot of these water issues are really gender issues also. And you might be aware that Sweden now has a feminist foreign policy, which we can expect that there'll be stronger emphasis on matters relating to gender. You might see that I'm wearing this bracelet to raise awareness of menstrual hygiene, the importance of menstrual hygiene. 22 yellow beads and 6 red beads here. I brought a number of briefs with me that I'll put here, and you can take a few copies if you want more information on this. There's quite a lot of useful information on our website. And this was very brief, but if you want more information, please contact me or the water policy expert at Sida, which is Anna Gren. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Claire, for this very comprehensive presentation on SIDA's support on promoting sciences and knowledge to address global issues. And it's a pleasure to hear that SIDA sees UNESCO as a global partner in promoting sciences and knowledge on new global challenges such as emerging pollutants, which is an issue of high relevance to both in developed and developing countries. And we would like to thank once again SIDA for this generous support for this project. So I will now continue with the presentation about this project and why this topic is important to UNESCO. Well, this project is one of the first projects funded by SIDA in the water sciences. But the issue of emerging pollutants has been addressed by UNESCO since many years. Actually, now we are in the 8th phase of the International Hydrological Program of UNESCO, and this topic has been addressed in the past 7th phase of the International Hydrological Program. Could we have the presentation, please? Yeah. Yes. So I would like to start my presentation with the background why this topic is important to be addressed both developed and developing countries. Well, of course, we know what are the emerging pollutants. Of course, first I have to acknowledge that there is not an internationally agreed definition on what are the emerging pollutants and what kind of contaminants or compounds can be classified under emerging pollutants. But there is a general understanding and agreement that emerging pollutants represent actually the largest fraction of pollutants present in water sources as well as in the environment. And these are the only main types of the emerging contaminants: pharmaceuticals, personal care products, pesticides, industrial chemicals, as well as domestic chemicals, and some other trace contaminants. But the primary pollutants represent only a tiny fraction of pollutants present in water resources and environment. So we actually have to deal with this tremendous challenge of multiple and wide variety of pollutants. And so why these pollutants are important to be addressed in the context of water and wastewater? Well, I have to say that the water is one of the main sinks of waste and pollutants in produced in our societies. And water and soil are actually the ultimate sinks of all pollution. So the domestic wastewater, industrial effluents, as well as solid waste are the main sources of these kind of pollutants. And also these pollutants can actually end up in water resources from other diffuse sources, such as agricultural runoff, urban runoff, as well as direct and indirect groundwater recharge. So these multiple sources of pollutants end up in contaminating our water resources, precious water resources, with a wide variety of pollutants, which about we know very little. So why these emerging pollutants are a concern? Because they have potentially dangerous risks to human health and environment. There are some studies which demonstrate that there can be negative impacts on human health and environment, but we don't know much about what are the exact impacts and how these impacts can actually demonstrate in the long-term exposure. Also, many of these pollutants are known to be persistent in the environment. And these pollutants are very complex in their forms and as well as in their actions. And the most important concern is because our existing water purification and wastewater treatment plants are not effective in removing these pollutants from wastewater or from drinking water. So this is a new challenge that we have to address, and this is a new challenge not only in developing countries but also in developed countries. But to address this issue, we have to face lots of problems because it is a new area. We have to start from knowing what is the problem and how this problem can be solved and what needs to be done. So one of the first starting points is to know the problem. So I have said that there is very little knowledge and scientific understanding on these pollutants and how they impact human health and environment, and how they actually behave in the water resources as well as in the environment. So we have to have more knowledge about the fate and accumulation in the environment. We have very little data on these emerging pollutants, both in water as well as in the environment. So there is lots of need to collect more data and information, and also to share the data and information which is available in some few countries. The issue is new, so there is very little awareness about this issue. I don't know how many of you have in-depth knowledge about this topic, working on this topic, or how many of you have been interested in this topic, but I assume that all of you are here because you are interested in this topic. But in the general public and other stakeholders may not be aware of what are the emerging pollutants and what are the potential impacts on our societies and human health and environment. The other main challenge is these pollutants are not regulated at all by national, international, or regional regulations for water, wastewater discharge, as well as environmental quality. And these pollutants are not monitored at all. And monitoring is a big challenge because, first of all, we need to know what to monitor, because these pollutants comprise a wide range of different contaminants. And second, we also need to have technical capacities, and because of the diversity of these pollutants, there is a unique requirement, technical requirement to monitor different types of pollutants, as well as we also have to deal with the advanced technologies which are capable of detecting these contaminants, which are usually present in very low concentrations. So what needs to be done? So we, to have a better policies and strategies and approach to deal with this challenge, the first starting point should be to have better knowledge, scientific knowledge on this problem, and that is where UNESCO has a role to play, and there is lots of potential for UNESCO to develop new scientific knowledge, promote research, as well as share and disseminate existing scientific information on this topic. The other issues, we have to promote better framework for monitoring and regulating these pollutants at the national as well as regional levels, and monitoring also needs to take into account the identification of main sources of these pollutants, as well as what are these pollutants that need to be taken into account as the first priority among the emerging pollutants, given that there are so many different types of contaminants. The other main challenge that we have to overcome is we need to put in place a set of policy, technical and educational approaches to tackle this issue. And so far, I think none of the countries have been able to put a comprehensive set of policies to address emerging pollutants, and only some European countries and the US have started to deal with this issue from the regulatory point of view, but I think there is lots of needs to be done in order to develop appropriate approaches and solutions. And because of this complexity of this issue, the innovative scientific knowledge as well as innovative technologies have a strong role to play, both in terms of knowing better these pollutants as well as developing technological solutions to tackle these pollutants, as well as removing them from wastewater and other streams of waste. And of course, this is not a problem and challenge only in the water sector. Its impact goes beyond the water sector. It impacts on food security. It impacts on the on the health and on ecosystems. So we also have to define the interlinkages of these pollutants with other sectors such as agriculture, industrial activities, as well as socioeconomic factors such as the lifestyle of people in different countries, both developing and developing countries, how people use different types of pharmaceuticals and how pharmaceutical waste are managed, how people use different types of drugs. So this issue is not only relevant in the science context, but it's also relevant at the international policy level. And this, I'm pleased to say that this issue has been fully acknowledged in the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals. And you may know that the goals, set of goals will be adopted next month by the UN General Assembly. And under this set of Sustainable Development Goals, the Goal 6 has a specific target on water quality, and that target specifically addresses the challenge of minimizing hazardous chemicals. But it is also addressed in other goals, such as sustainable consumption and production, where there's the management of chemicals and all waste should be sustainable, and there should be reduction of the release of these chemicals into water, air, and soil. And also this issue is addressed under other goals, such as goal on ecosystems, on poverty, as well as on health. So this issue is fully embedded in the forthcoming post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals. So what UNESCO is doing in this field. So this issue will contribute to better water security in the world. And so water security is the main theme of the IHP 8th phase of International Hydrological Program. Also, water quality, this topic is one of the key priority areas of the water quality activities of UNESCO IHP, and it's implemented under the UNESCO IHP International Initiative on Water Quality. And you see that water quality has linkages with all sectors of the society. And UNESCO has been active in promoting sciences and knowledge in this area since the past 7th phase of the International Hydrological Program of UNESCO, and we have implemented several activities, including focused meetings and symposiums, as well as some knowledge-sharing events. This project now has the main objective of strengthening the capacities of UNESCO member states in addressing the challenges of emerging pollutants, which may have potentially serious impacts on the human health. And so how we do it, we have to promote knowledge on these issues, as well as we have to promote also the safe reuse of wastewater. And by doing that, UNESCO will contribute in strengthening these capacities of UNESCO member states in better addressing water resources and having better food and water security. This project is implemented under the UNESCO IHP International Initiative on Water Quality, and is fully funded by Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. And the project has duration of 3.5 years. It just has started this year. And we have organized this project into 3 main components. So first component focuses on the strengthening the scientific research and policy on emerging pollutants in water and wastewater. And under this component, we have developed a set of case studies. We have selected 16 case studies covering all regions of the world. And these case studies actually aimed to stock taking on the existing knowledge and research in different parts of the world. And these case studies will address not only water hydrological aspects of these pollutants, but it will also address policy and socioeconomic and capacity building aspects of how to address this challenge. Also, under this project, we are aiming to develop technical guidelines, which will be the main source of science-based policy making in UNESCO member states on how to develop sound policies to address this issue. And second component focuses on promoting scientific exchange and collaboration on this topic, because we know that there is very little research has been done on this topic, and mainly the research is done in developed countries. So we, by promoting collaboration on this topic, we would like to promote more scientific research in developing countries, so that after the project there will be a global network of scientists, experts, as well as research institutions working on this topic, and after the completion of the project, that network can still continue to work on this topic, so that this issue will be addressed beyond the project duration. The third component focuses on capacity building and awareness raising, because this is the main, one of the main outputs is to build the essential capacity in the water sector, as well as among the other stakeholders of the other sectors, to have a better knowledge on this topic, so that the countries can incorporate this issue into water resources management, as well as on policies that are relevant to this topic. And we will do that by developing regional training workshops, also developing awareness-raising materials. And you, after the completion of this project, we are aiming to have one big international conference towards the end of 2017 or first half of 2018, where all the results of the project will be presented. And we will also, that will also be a time when we can stocktake what has been done and what needs to be done in the future, and how we can promote collaboration to address this issue beyond the duration of this project. And you have the brochure of this project. You may have more information about the topics and activities to be addressed by this project. So we are just starting this project, so it is the first official event organized under this project, and we have selected few case studies, and among these 16 case studies, we have invited here 6 case studies, one from each region, and now we will continue to hear from the regional case study lead experts to have more information how this issue is being addressed in different continents of the world. And I just would like to say, note that the 2 of the case study presenters have missed their flights, so they may not be able to join us, but we will have other presentations. So with this, I would like to end my presentation, and I would like to invite our case study presenters to continue with the presentation of the series of case studies. And our first case study is from Africa. It is about pharmaceutical pollution in the aquatic environment in Nigeria and their potential ecotoxicological effect. Okay, maybe he has not yet been able to find a room, but we saw him yesterday, so we will switch the order. So then we will move to the region Asia. And this case study is very interesting to UNESCO, because this case study addresses this topic of emerging pollutants in a UNESCO World Heritage Site in India. So Dr. Anjan Kumar Prusty from Gujarat Institute of Desert Ecology in India will present a case study on evaluation of selected persistent inorganic and organic pollutants in hydrological system in the Kioladeo National Park. Dr. Prusty, you have to.
Well, good morning. Thank you so much to UNESCO IHP team for having me over here. Yeah, without spending much time, let me go to the topic which I have to discuss. It's basically an approach to consolidate the available information on the 2 groups of pollutants we are targeting here. That is endocrine disrupting chemicals, certain toxic metals, and the other group is like pesticides. Now, the study area is in western part of India. It's basically UNESCO World Heritage Site. We have 3 World Heritage Sites of conservation significance in our country, 2 more including Sundarban and Chilka. I have been focusing on Keoladeo National Park for quite some time now, and we intend to compile the existing information on these both metals and pesticides in the hydrological system. And this UNESCO World Heritage Site is interesting in the sense it is not surviving on its own. Basically, it has been in a confluence of 3 major river basins. So any of the perturbations happening in any of the river basins and the watershed, ultimately the result is seen, the impact is seen in this particular World Heritage Site. Now, this is what I just did discuss about it. Now, what we were planning to look at is to see whether there could be a temporal pattern in these pollutants, because there have been many studies in this area almost since last 3 to 4 decades, and many of them have been in a gray literature form, and some of them are published as well. So our focus would be to compiling all different kind of available literature. Now, another issue here is, it's not about compiling the literature, rather to look at if there was some kind of persistence observed, persistence of these chemical residues in water, basically surface water, groundwater as well, and the soil. The area being predominantly agricultural landscape, we do foresee some kind of flux in the ecosystem, different trophic levels. So this is what we basically, once we are done with the consolidation and the review, the expected outcomes are as in the slide. And there are certain contributing factors in this, is like one is the frequency of use, the second one is the application rate. One of our recent investigation, we found there is almost 108% increase in the use of certain pesticides in various vegetable crops. Coming to the data sheet, how we are going to have access to this, some through our ongoing and completed research projects, we will be able to have access. Second, the data which is available in different government departments. So there, one, we will be looking into, definitely the driving force is the meteorological aspects, the rainfall and so on. And then we have different land use types. When the land use has changed, if the normal agricultural landscape has been increasing and the intensification has been observed, so how the chemical input rate has gone up and how those chemicals are finding place in the hydrological system. And then the 3 group which we are going to target is organochlorines, organophosphates, and metals as well. Of course, there are synthetic pyrethroids. Pyrethroids have also been seen in some of the areas. And these are our potential target agencies from where we will be able to access the data. Plus, these are all our published and unpublished research reports. Well, this is what, for the preliminary results, for 2 more minutes I would take. This is where our location in very close to Delhi, around 180 kilometers from Delhi. And there are certain ecological casualties in this area for last 40, 50 years. And many of them I have just briefed over here. If we say it is basically a casualty where the wildlife has been the major, what is that? The prey. That is, there have been bird mortality in the area, and sometime it was due to aldrin poisoning, sometime it is monocrotophos, and different other kind of chemicals which are getting into this area, like this World Heritage Site. Now, let me go to in more detail. So that is what made us to think why to target only to the that particular site, why not to look for other areas which are surrounding. So our exercise is basically based on one theory that is called Schloss Theory, single large or several small. Because whether we need to protect the single large, this World Heritage Site which is around 30 square kilometer, or there are several smaller wetlands which provide alternate habitat to birds, which provide alternate habitat to other wildlife at times of water scarcity. So that's what made us to make a more in-depth review, and these are the locations which we have in fact identified all along the river basins. So our major area is this one, what we are now targeting. But we are also trying to look beyond the status in other areas as well. And it's very preliminary observation what we have come out with. So these are the smaller structures which we have identified, close to 36 structures. Yeah, and they are the level of water inundation, how many months in a year water remains over there, and then its corresponding size. Now these are certain chemicals which are rampantly used for various cropping pattern in the area, and of course our target chemicals as well. And probably this is what I was just referring, there is this much percentage of increase in the use of chemicals over last 25 years. And so these are the expected residues in the hydrological different compartment that we are going to target. And this is what is a very preliminary comparison of what was the scenario in 2010 and what is very recently in 2014. So with these preliminary findings, I look forward to have a more better and consolidated database which can contribute to UNESCO's major project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Prusti. Our next case study is from the Northern Africa and Middle East and Northern Africa, MENA region, and I would like to invite Dr. Alfa Mahjoub from National Research Institute for Rural Engineering, Water and Forestry in Tunisia, and Dr. Mahjoub will present a case study on contaminants of emerging concern in wet soil area in Tunisia, occurrence in irrigation water. So that now goes to the wastewater. So please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to be here and to give you an introduction to our project called EcoZ. It's very easy to remind. Okay, our project is standing for Contaminant of Emerging Concern in Wet Soil Area in Tunisia, and we will speak about its occurrence in irrigation water and implication. So, the main scope of our project is to collect data. We are going to collect already existing data, and we are going to try to produce new ones on the occurrence of these emerging pollutants in water resources, wastewater and groundwater, soil, and when it's possible, plants. So we are going to provide information on their relevance and their potential impacts. So our main objective is to address the occurrence of these CECs, or contaminant of emerging concern, in these different matrices. And more specifically, we are going to investigate their relevance in these matrices, and it will be based on the available information and data, and with regards to their fate, behavior, and occurrence. So here you can have a view of our experimental site. Yeah. Here is Tunisia. For those who don't know where is Tunisia, it's in the north of Africa, and here is our the city of Nebel, and here is our experimental site. So this area is covering 280 hectares, and it's exploited by about 300 farmers. In this region, we have applied wastewater since the 80s, so it has received a lot of water, and farmers are using furrow irrigation. So you can imagine the load of water, how many pollutant can exist there. The main challenges in this area are the low quality of the wastewater, so the secondary treatment is not able to remove all the pollutant, and even the treatment plant is sometimes overloaded. And the quantity sometimes is not sufficient, so the farmers are sometimes obliged to use the groundwater and to blend both. But the groundwater sometimes is already polluted with nitrate and salt because there is seawater intrusion here. So, in this area, we don't know the load of pollutant, which is the second challenge. Oh. Okay, so what are the expected outcomes of this project? Well, first of all, we are going to have a better understanding of the challenge in this region regarding the water quality, the agricultural practices, the legislation, the environmental impacts, and so on. We are always also going to share knowledge with research institutions and with development institutions also, because ministries and agencies, sometimes they are not aware of this concern. Third, we are going to establish a kind of watching list. We are going to select which are the pollutants that may occur in this environment and try to select some of them to monitor in future research program. We are going also to provide some kind of science-based information to policymakers and decision makers because they are not aware, as I said, of this load of pollutants, and so that they can enforce the law and the legislation in our country. Also, we would like to recommend some appropriate technology. We have an expert that would recommend some, let's say, low-cost, technology that can be applied by the farmers or some other stakeholders. Also, we are going to evaluate the analytical capacity because, as we know, emerging pollutant to be detected in the environment needs some skills. So we are going to evaluate, yes, if we have these skills or not. It's very important also to strengthen the ties between the partners that contributed to this project, not only between North and South, but also beyond the Atlantic, and I will show you later our research team. And last but not least, the connection with other projects. There is an ongoing project called Cost Action. It's implemented at the European level, and it's involved with several research institutions, and many experts are contributing to this project. Tunisia had the opportunity to be there as a neighboring country, so we are participating in some working groups. And also we would like to connect that with a previous project called Empower Tunisia, standing for Emerging Pollutants in Water and Wastewater, which was funded by DAAD, which is the German Academic Exchange Service. So I come to the end, and I would like just to show you some preliminary results about the regulation. So in Tunisia, we do not have regulation about these CECs. We just have kind of global parameter called pesticides. So we don't know which compounds are included. And secondly, for guidelines for discharge in the water bodies, we expect to have a long list of compounds, but we do not have data. We just have copied this. So we need data, scientific-based data on these pollutants. To conclude, this is our team and experts. So you can see here we have experts from France, we have experts from Germany, from Cyprus, and also from Canada. And we are connecting all these researchers. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we will go to this region, Europe, and Europe is one of the most advanced in terms of research and policies on this topic, and we have the pleasure to have the HELCOM Secretariat, Baltic Marine Environmental Cooperation Commission, and Dr. Marta Ruiz will share with us the information on how pharmaceuticals are being monitored in the Baltic regions. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I would just like to thank again the organizers for giving us the opportunity to be here today. My name is Marta Ruiz, and I come from the HELCOM Secretariat in Helsinki. For those who are not that familiar with the Baltic Sea, it's quite a unique sea. It's one of the biggest brackish body of water in the world. It's surrounded by quite an active countries regarding agriculture and industry activities, as well as shipping lines. It is quite shallow waters, plus low salinity, and this almost closed sea. Therefore, it is sensitive to human pressures. And this tries to summarize what is the Helsinki Convention. The Baltic Marine Environmental Protection Commission is a governing body that tries to support the Baltic Convention, which was signed in 1974, and currently it gathers 9 countries around the Baltic Sea plus the EU. The aim of the convention is to protect the Baltic Sea environment from all types of sources through intergovernmental cooperation. As you know, residues pharmaceuticals is a global issue. This slide comes from a German study from last year, where we can see that residues of pharmaceuticals have been found in 71 countries around the world, in all types of matrix, from drinking water to tap water and surface water. So it is really an issue, and therefore it is also an issue for the Baltic Sea. There are scattered studies on the issue, and finally I may say that there are residues have been found in different places, and residues of more than 15 pharmaceutical substances. The issue is that there is not a regional comprehensive assessment of the problem. So there is a commitment that dates back to 2010 within the HELCOM ministerial declaration, and it has been again ratified in the commitment of the last year, where the idea is to collect information on pharmaceuticals and assess the status of contamination of pharmaceuticals and the degradation in the marine environment. What we are doing so far is that we are working on the development of diclofenac concentration as HELCOM indicator of good environmental status. At EU level, we are all aware about this EU directive from 2013, where there is specific provisions for pharmaceutical substances, and diclofenac is included in the priority list, in the watch list. Within the policy area of hazards of the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, it is specifically going to be addressed during the period 2015-2017, the topic of pharmaceuticals in the Baltic Sea. So, aware of the situation, the HELCOM Secretariat, together with the Swedish Environmental Agency, took the initiative to draft the first report on pharmaceuticals in the Baltic Sea. What is the scope of such a status report? Is mainly to assess, first, the state of contamination. We are talking about observed concentrations and the environmental effects, and subsequently to assess the pressure, which will be mainly related to consumption of pharmaceuticals, sources, and pathways. This is the milestones we want to achieve. I'm not going to go into detail, but the idea is that we will be able to present the final status report at the next HELCOM meeting, which will take place in March 2006. So please, for further information about the project, I'm here to help, but otherwise, please visit the HELCOM website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta, for this very brief, concise, nice presentation. We have Dr. Oluwatosin Olirenamoye from Africa, who will now present the case study from Africa on pharmaceutical pollution in the aquatic environment of Nigeria. So this was supposed to be the first presentation. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm late. I lost my way. The title refers to what we're trying to do in this case study. Those are the contents, briefly. And this is about Nigeria. There's a big population there. A lot of it is urban, and they live, a lot of people live in slums and unplanned environments. And the study locale is Lagos, actually, which is one of the 2 megacities in Africa, apart from Cairo and Kinshasa. Waste management is very poor at the best of times, and there's a strong urban drift. People go to the urban areas every year, and built-in capacity infrastructure cannot keep up. This is the Lagos Lagoon, which surrounds Lagos, and this is the sinkhole of all human activities around in the city. This shows one of the slum environments. This is another one, and that's another one, and this is another one. Now, human waste has been implicated as the major route of entry of pharmaceutical residues into the environment. So in Lagos, it's pretty bad and extensive, and we can see here that people, despite that, still use the water for the activities, both economic and otherwise. So this is the scope of the proposed study, to gather information about use, disposal, and all that. It's necessarily a limited study by duration and funding, but it's a prelude to larger initiatives and integral to emerging pollutants in wastewater reuse in developing countries. So these are our objectives. We set up a database on existing data in Nigeria. There's very little of that, but we got some last year. We worked with the German Environment Agency. The last speaker showed an SAICM map, and our information was what put Nigeria on that map. So we want to gather further information on pharmaceutical consumption, fill the gaps in the database with our own measurements, and investigate, limited again, potential ecotoxicological effects of exposure to pharmaceuticals on aberrant species, especially fish. And these are preliminary findings from last year. We screened for 37 pharmaceuticals, 12 were found. The antibiotics and the non-steroidals were the most prevalent. And diclofenac was found in some sludge samples at 1,100 micrograms per kilogram, which exceeds the highest measured concentration worldwide as of that time. Preliminary findings. 4 out of the things we looked for were detected. That's acetyl salicylate, beta-acetylsterol, chlorfibrate, and sulfodiazine were found in our study, but had not been reported in any African country before then. And these are some results of the analysis that were done at the International Water Center in Mulheim. And that's the continuation of the first table. And these are preliminary findings from household usage and disposal study, which was questionnaire-based. We found out that non-prescription drug use was prevalent. Antibiotics were the most abused, followed by the NSAIDs. And these are the disposal patterns. 75% of respondents flushed away unused pharmaceuticals. So that's a significant entry point through house sewage. 15.9 gave it away. Of course, we can assume that the fate of that one is also the fate of the larger one. Some people burnt, and significantly, some people disposed in trash, and most of this trash ends up in water or dumped in surface water directly. So this is a kind of schematic, kind of graphic that shows household drug by category, drug use by category, disposal modes. And this is our hospital waste management survey, which was part of that study too. And none of the hospitals that we surveyed actually met international best standards. They fell very well below. But more significantly, the wastewater from the hospitals usually ended up directly in the lagoon. There's a kind of private-public partnership. So you have private people who pick up wastewater from the hospitals. They're not regulated. They simply go somewhere and dump it in the lagoon. So, okay. All the locations of it failed to meet best standards for collection, segregation, pretreatment, and final disposal. And these are the results. Our tool was based on the WHO rapid assessment mode. Just 1 minute, that's the end of that. And these are the references. Sure.
Thank you. Now you have heard about different case studies, how this issue have been seriously affecting different compartments of the environment as well as water uses. So I would like now to discuss in a panel discussion how this issue should be addressed. And with this, I would like to invite our panel speakers. We have panel speakers composed of policy makers, researchers, as well as the lead experts of the case studies. It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Sasha Koshima from U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Dr. Ashlihan Kirsch from Turkish Water Institute, and then all case study presenters. And after a few questions to case study presenters and panel speakers, we will have interactive discussion with you, with the participants. I would like to start my question to Sasha. So U.S. has been one of the countries which has more advanced regulatory framework to deal with emerging pollutants, and you have lists of contaminants and emerging pollutants which is being expanded every year. And so how the implementation of this regulatory framework is being done, and do you face any challenges, and what are the challenges, and what are the lessons learned with developing countries in terms of developing an effective regulatory framework which is also affordable to implement with the existing capacity of scientific knowledge as well as technical knowledge?
Can you hear me? All right, great. Well, first of all, I would like to extend my thanks to UNESCO and Sida for inviting me to this morning's session. And I'm very pleased to hear this topic being discussed, as it is very important it's very important for drinking health safety. And in the United States, I just want to mention the Drinking Health, or we call it the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is one of the primary water laws in the U.S. in addition to the Clean Water Act. We're looking at the issue of emerging contaminants since 1972 when the act was established, basically because of the detection of synthetic organochlorine compounds and synthetic organics in the drinking water. So we have since then developed various policies and regulations. And at that time, we have set up priority chemicals of 127. And now we currently regulate about 90 chemicals. The emerging contaminants are constantly being discovered because of improvements and advancements in science, technology, detection, even at the parts per trillion level. So when it comes to, before we come to regulating these chemicals, we go through a candidate contaminant list, we identify them, and we monitor them by law under another piece of law called unregulated monitoring rule. We monitor these chemicals for 5 years. And what we collect are the occurrence, the toxicology endpoints, the health effects, and treatment as well, and try to, before these chemicals become law. So many of the chemicals that has been presented from this morning, we have, especially the POPs, these are regulated chemicals. Some of the new emerging ones from pharmaceuticals or personal health care products, we have numerous of those from, again, similar types of chemicals from non-prescription drugs, insect repellents, to plasticizers used in industry, and some of the chemicals that was discovered or listed by HELCOM, as well as there was one other presentation for diclofenac. That was also on our contaminant list that we monitor right now. Additional ones that are of importance to us are PFAS, the perchlorates, the perfluoro compounds, and cyanotoxins. Since we have discovered these are related to the non-point source, so there are various regulations on point source charges, so we call them effluent limitations and guidelines. And then there are the non-point source, which we also regulate through some best management practices, in essentially promoting best management practices. Cyanotoxins that has caused impairment to our drinking water facilities last year in Toledo and so forth have been, now we just released the health advisories. And what's contained in the health advisories are related to how to monitor, what are the analytical methods. So I'm very curious with the Nigerian one, when you develop databases and monitoring techniques that they're standardized so that you can compare these results with other monitoring efforts in the region or in your country. So we have promoting a lot of analytical methods as well as standardized criteria for those, and as well as how to interpret a lot of these data. A lot of these efforts are joined with our state environmental departments, as well as partnerships, our research foundations, whether it's Wastewater Reuse Foundation or the American Waterworks Foundation. We have numerous partners with universities to do a public comment and public awareness raising to comment before anything goes into a regulation. So these are some of they're very intricate processes, but legalizing these kind of procedures are important, I think, so we can determine the path forward.
Thank you. I will now go to Dr. Ashley Hanker. You work with the Turkish Water Institute. It is a research institute under the government ministry and dealing with water issues. And so now this issue of emerging pollutants is mainly discussed among the scientific community. So how the science and policy interface on raising awareness or informing policymakers on this new emerging issue has been taken into account, and what are the most effective ways, even if this issue is being discussed at the early stages among the scientific discussions, to already start informing our policymakers about the importance of addressing this challenge.
Thank you very much, Rantuya, and I'm very pleased to be here in this very important topic. And this is one of my academic interests as a scientist, and also being a part of a governmental institute, I am also trying to nowadays couple the scientific data with the decision makers. As we have heard from the presentations and from the comments from Sasha, the legislation issue is very challenging in these emerging contaminants. Yes, the scientists are aware that is a problem. They are doing lots of different research projects, and it's an important part to convey these information to the policymakers. And when it comes to the legislations, as we all are aware, it is very challenging because we have lots of chemicals. And most of the time, we do not know which one to look for. And in the case studies, we have seen different groups of chemicals. So each region has its particular problems and particular pollutants. And in our research projects, as scientists, we are mostly looking at the ones that we think are important, and we focus on some of the groups. Maybe we are missing some of the other groups. This is related with the analytical limitations. We are focusing on our scientific research on the ones that we can measure. So if the governments and scientists can work together, so it will be more efficient to identify what are the relevant groups to look for. So by this way, the scientific funds should be allocated to the groups that are of importance, relevance. So with the institutes working closer with the governments, we have to promote this cooperation. In our country, in Turkey, we are trying to achieve this by having a research institute under the Ministry of Water Affairs. So I'm coming from the Turkish Water Institute. We are trying to fulfill the gap of the research needs of the ministry, and we are trying to make the dialogue between the academia and the governmental institutes. So by supporting this kind of research projects, and all institutions have to be in dialogue. The governments have to tell, this is our need. If irrigation-free use is promoted, then the government should tell the scientists to study on the problems of the irrigation reuse.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashlehan. I would like to have more in-depth question about the HELCOM status report, and this is one of the first comprehensive regional assessment on one major group of these emerging pollutants, and it's also supported by the political commitment. I think the ministerial declaration is one of the first political commitment actually to address this issue. And now you are collecting data from 13 countries in the region. So do you face data challenge? Do countries have sufficient data? If they have, are they willing to share them at the regional level?
Okay. Thank you very much for us being here and also for the question. We have just at this stage that we have started collecting the information from the Baltic Sea member states. We have prepared templates for that, and these templates have been prepared according to what we have been able to find. And the good thing is that as an intergovernmental organization, we have direct contact with national contact points. Therefore, we are able to contact the who is who in each country, which is really helping to gather as much information as possible. We have been able to gather some sort of information. We are still dealing with the process. And there are differences from one country to the other. Some countries are just are even developing a screening methodology for monitoring, and other ones are starting to compile information from project research and so on. We have a very good starting point with the diclofenac as an indicator. As I was saying before, we are drafting it currently at this moment, and this has served as a compilation starting point of information, of all the information that we have around the Baltic Sea. We are optimistic about the final result. I think there was not such an assessment, as far as we know.
Yeah.
And the idea is that once we have this knowledge-based project results, we will be able to suggest further measures to be developed.
And also to identify the data gaps. Yeah.
Definitely.
And also to have more incentives to countries to have data and share data. I would like to ask a question to Dr. Majoub. So this is one very particular area. It goes beyond the water sources, but one particular aspect of emerging pollutants' impact on food security. So in countries where wastewater is scarce, wastewater is used in one of the main irrigation water sources. And agricultural activities are also sources of some of groups of emerging pollutants, and then they end up also being in agricultural producers. So you have been working with, I suppose, working with farmers. Have you been able to raise awareness about the importance of having a comprehensive approach to deal with this issue so that the agricultural activities would use less chemicals, so that when they use wastewater, they would have to deal with less risks? And how was the message transmitted to agricultural producers?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to highlight that Tunisia is actually using only 20% of the produced wastewater. It's a secondary treatment, and by law, vegetables and eaten raw crops are not allowed to be irrigated with this water. So the only crops that are allowed to be irrigated are forage crops, fruit trees, and industrial crops. So this makes the difference. So this we have to distinguish between what is eaten raw and what is used should be processed, for example. This is a limiting factor to farmers. So farmers are not allowed to grow vegetables, which bring a high income. So from point of view of food security, the farmers are suffering when they are constrained to use this wastewater, and with this limited, let's say, limited number of crops. While working with farmers, farmers are not aware of these pollutants. They may just say, yes, we know that there are detergents, that there are pharmaceuticals, but they do not know the risks or how these pollutants can be transferred to crops. We have observed that some of them may just cultivate vegetables close to some fruit trees, and they do not know how these pollutants can be transferred from one field to another. We have also to deal with the regulation in Tunisia regarding the wastewater use. We have to improve treatment technologies. We have to have a good secondary treatment, and then to go further for the third treatment, to allow farmers to have more acceptance. Also, we should implement and enforce the regulation of discharge, because farmers are pumping water from the rivers, and this is a source of pollutants. I think the major pollutants are pesticides, as you have said, and farmers till now are not aware of the risk, and they do not take any protection measures. They do not wear masks, for example, when they treat their crops. So we have really, let's say, to prioritize what are pollutants that have to be, let's say, which pollutant can be put, can be set, where we say to farmer, you have to limit the spread of this kind of pollutants. Yes.
Thank you. My last question would be to both of you, because of the similarities of the case studies, to Dr. Prousti and Dr. Olare-Moye. So some argue that because of the low level of concentrations of most of the emerging pollutants found in water source and in the environment, the risks should not be considered as dangerous, and so we don't have to overestimate the potential risks to the environment or to ecosystems or to human health. And so you have been working on this World Heritage Site, Natural Heritage Site, which provides habitat to many species, and you are also working on this Lagos Lagoon, and so you have done some preliminary research on the potential impacts on ecosystems and aquatic habitats of these pollutants. So how do you see the risk? Is the risk really big, or is the risk something that should be considered but not as big as we should immediately take action on this topic?
Can I?
Yeah.
I think the international interest in this particular matter, including us being here, actually answers that question. Lethality is no longer an endpoint for toxicological concentration. We are more interested in the effects of lifelong generational exposures, especially on aberrant species like fish. So they may not actually die. Some of my work has shown that using some other biomarkers, micronuclei, histology, and other pathologies, have shown that the water bodies we're looking at can actually cause perturbations in resident fauna. That's been established. Now, like we said, and according to Dalton, pharmaceuticals are pseudo-persistent. Even if they have individually low half-lives, They're constantly being introduced, and so the animals are constantly exposed to them. Now, there are some changes at genetic level which could have effects on fertility and fecundity and other things. So what happens is, if this is allowed to continue and undocumented, we could find out that, like in Nigeria, the Lagos Lagoon provides sustenance for people who are the fisher folk, and the fish are the cheapest form of protein for the lower economic classes. So if we allow this to continue, don't document it, we may end up losing numbers and fishing fields. And automatically that goes against the Millennium Development Goals, which aim to eradicate poverty and some other things. So we should start documenting now. So we know what's there, we know where remediation is necessary, where the red flags are, and if we have to conserve anything, we should do it in time. So I think, and I think this is one of the things that's driving the SAICM initiative, that if we can get all this information together from different regions of the world, we can show that it's a global problem, it's not going to go away, there's a tendency for it to increase, and action has to be taken. So I don't think it's something to be ignored. I think it's something to actually find a way of snapping it into other international frameworks so that we can actually start taking action right now.
Thank you. And Dr. Pursti?
Yeah. Well, many of the points what he has raised, I do agree with him, but I have a different perspective looking into our site-specific case study. Basically, the issue what you have raised, we need not look at only from that particular World Heritage Site point of view. It has a larger regional implications. In the sense, when I have been, like I just mentioned that because of water scarcity or erratic rainfall, when the migratory birds do visit that site and they don't find water, they need to depend on other alternate sites. That's where the concept of satellite wetlands we have come out with, and that's where the smaller habitats come into more picture. One. Second issue is, there are two ways of looking at it. One is sometimes the chemical is not getting detected or getting detected in a very low level. Second, its application rate and frequency of use. So the year of observation, the application could be less, or because of its persistence time, less half-life, it might have been detected at that particular year of observation. But when we look at a trend, temporal basis every 5 years or every 10 years, that's what is going to provide us more insights into a regional perspective as to how these chemicals are being used. One. Second, it's not always the mortality that counts. Yeah, this site we have been observing bird mortalities like 80, 85 and mid-90s and 2000 also. Various crane species have been dying, which are mostly migratory to that particular area. But second thing, what if we look at, many of these chemicals are known to be endocrine disruptors. One, they do provide induce morbidity expressions. Yeah. So it's not always the mortality that counts.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Of course, it's very interesting to continue the discussion, but we have run out of time. But I would like to allow a couple of questions from the floor. Be brief in your questions, and please address questions to specific or to the panel. Are there any questions? So, yes, please. Yeah. Yes, please, yeah. Comments are welcomed as well.
My name is Antoinette Komen. I work with SNV. It's a foundation, Dutch foundation, and I work on water and sanitation. So one of the areas where we're working on, of course, is the management of sludge, of excreta, especially in urban areas. And in our sector, there's a lot of expectations about reuse. And I come to this session because I think in the issue of reuse, those emerging pollutants and having more clarity about those is very important. My only recommendation would be that this work also tries to speak to other sectors who are less involved in this very specific analysis or all the pharmaceuticals that are there, and tries to speak to the professionals working, for example, in the wash sector, of what are the risks and what are the priorities.
Thank you very much for this very important comment. Actually, these are only some of the case studies. We have a case study in Mexico, which is looking at the health and other aspects. We also have one case study in India, which is looking at particularly emerging contaminants in sludge. So we are going to have a comprehensive study. So it was Blanca, you have a question? Yes, please. And then you would be the next. No. Okay.
I'm from South Africa, Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. May I please ask, I think is the speaker from Tunisia, if there are any regulations with regards to the acid mine drainage affecting the irrigation sector?
Actually, this topic is on the learning curve in Tunisia. We have several mines, and there are several, let's say, few research projects ongoing on these topics. So I may send you some data and some publication on this topic, but it's still on the learning curve.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I would love to have more questions, but I think we have to wrap up. And I would like to invite my colleague, Mr. Ignacio de Regibus, to give the wrap up of the discussions, and we will conclude this session afterwards. Yeah.
So during this event, many interesting points were raised. Some case studies were really interesting, also presented, and discussions conducted on these case studies on emerging pollutants in water and wastewater in developed and developing countries. There is a major takeaway from this session on UNESCO official event and some other considerations for our reference. The first challenge is it's faced all over the world, and is that we have knowledge gaps, scientific information, and the need for more thorough research in emerging pollutants. Most of them, or most countries, are at initial stages, and these are a keystone to further on this debate. Some examples of these are found in pharmaceutical pollution studies in aquatic environments and their assessment in Nigeria, reclaimed water irrigation systems, about their fate, their behavior, and their risk in Tunisia. And PIPs and POPs and their occurrence in one of UNESCO's World Heritage Site in a national park in India. However, regional and global approaches are being started and studies conducted to address these challenges in more comprehensive ways. The Baltic Sea is a good example of that. Not only to assess, but also to further policies, recommendations, and actions. Lots remain to be done. Challenges are big, but also opportunities are big. Immediate responses and actions are needed now. In this sense, UNESCO promotes and supports member states' efforts for more scientific research, to disseminate knowledge, to develop policy guidelines, capacity building, and public awareness. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is the conclusion of our event, and we wish we could have more time to discuss. And actually, I would like to say that this project, UNESCO project, is one of the pioneering projects within the international water community, as well as within the UN system, to address this issue in a more comprehensive way at the global level, covering all the regions. And I think UNESCO is taking very bold action in terms of addressing this huge challenge at the global scale by promoting sciences and knowledge and disseminating the existing best practice and information and data. So, of course, we are at the initial stages. In the course of the next 3 years, we will be continuing to promote discussion, scientific discussion, and dissemination and sharing on this topic through various activities, including scientific conferences as well as publications. And I would like to say the next steps is the case study results will be available in the first half of the next year, and then we will have some concrete messages from these case studies how to best address this issue and what needs to be done in terms of putting in place effective policy frameworks, regulatory frameworks, and also improving monitoring capacities, as well as improving and strengthening the scientific knowledge base. So we will have a closed meeting of the project tomorrow and on Tuesday, but because of the room capacity, we will not accommodate everyone, but I think we still have a couple of seats available. Those who are strongly interested on this topic and who have concrete ideas for collaboration and contribution to this project and to various activities of the project, you are welcome to come to our closed meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the room. You will have there is information on closed meetings, and you will have room information on the closed meeting there. And so I think we can accommodate 4 or 5 additional participants. And last but not least, I see that Dr. Usman has just joined the room. He had missed his flight. It was not his fault, but it was the airlines. But I just would like to introduce you, but unfortunately, we don't have time to hear from you about your case study. But because Dr. Han's case study was really interesting, I will just give a very brief overview. It was supposed to provide a modeling and map at the global level, which doesn't exist at all, about the presence of these pollutants at the global scale and what are the key areas or hotspots. So Dr. Han is over there. So with this, I would like to thank you for your participation in this event, and we look forward to having you in various events and also to have your contributions to this project activities. And if you have specific questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you. And I also would like to thank our panel speakers and case study presenters who have shared with us the important results. Thank you.